of the Council. We all hope that with our efforts we can avoid adding fuel to the tension. And what's really needed, badly needed, is more diplomatic efforts. So that's our position.
So as a procedural vote, can the meeting be blocked, do you believe? Do you have the votes?
I think efforts are still being underway. As far as I know, the President of the Council, many members, including China, are all making efforts trying to avoid a public confrontation. The efforts are going on.
Just to confirm, will you vote no or abstain?
We will vote no. As I said, what we want is quiet diplomacy. Yeah.
Can you have veto doesn't work in the procedural vote?
Good morning. The Ambassador of Norway will give a brief stakeout, but I'm sorry we don't have time for questions right now because the meeting is about to adjourn. Thank you.
Good morning. We will now have a meeting under the agenda item International Threat to Peace and Security, a meeting called by the US. In a national capacity, and Rosemary DiCarlo will brief at the meeting. In a national capacity, I would just like to say that we are concerned with the military build-up and the threat against Ukraine. This afternoon, we will have a meeting where we will adopt the mandate on UNSMIL, which is a technical rollover for 3 months. And then this is the last day of the Norwegian presidency, so I would like to thank you so much for all the good cooperation we have had with you, and we are really grateful for the work also you do in order to spread the word about the important work of the Security Council also during the Norwegian presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think that the US and its allies feel that they've done a lot of work around the United Nations, around all 193 members of the United Nations, and around the Security Council, and they believe they have support now for their view that what Russia is doing is a threat to international peace and security. Also worth telling you that in 24 hours' time, the presidency of the Security Council, currently held by Norway, will be taken over by Russia. And I think they wanted to have a meeting where at least the presidency of the Security Council wasn't in the hands of Russia. Russia only has some limited sway in what it can do as president that could make this favourable to them, but I think they still felt it would be cleaner to do it during Norway's presidency. Russia does have things it can do even now before it's president. We've just seen in the last few years all the ambassadors going to the Security Council chamber. In fact, we were listening just moments ago to the president of the Security Council for this month, January, in the last day, Norway. And what looks likely is that there's going to be a procedural vote to decide whether this meeting can take place. We heard in the last couple of minutes as well from the Chinese ambassador to the United Nations. He said he will be voting with Russia. No, this meeting should not take place. His view was that this is the time for quiet diplomacy, not for big meetings in public of the Security Council. What's not clear is the dynamics around the council table of the rest of the 15 council members.
The 8,960th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is threat to international peace and security. The agenda is, I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, the Russian Federation is asking for a procedural vote on the proposal to hold this meeting on the initiative of the United States. The delegation of the U.S., in explaining its proposal on convening this meeting, has pointed out that it considers the deployment of Russian troops within Russian territory as a threat to international peace and security. This is not only unacceptable interference in the domestic affairs of our state, but also an attempt to mislead the international community on the situation in the region and also the reason for the current global tensions. We are being asked to convene a Security Council meeting on unfounded accusations that we have refuted frequently. Furthermore, we frequently refuted, consistently refuted. Furthermore, the open format for discussion proposed by the US on this extremely sensitive topic is making this a classic example of megaphone diplomacy and working in public for the public, rather. There's a need to review this, and we've all stated this frequently. We do not think that this will help to bring this council together. Rather, we fully understand that the desire of our American colleagues to whip up hysterics regarding its own situations, regarding the so-called Russian act of aggression, is something that they want to do, including within the Security Council from this rostrum. Our Security Council colleagues are being put in an extremely difficult position. This is of great harm, this hysterica, to Ukraine itself. The president of which, as we've seen, has asked Western countries a few days ago not to whip up hysterics regarding the deployment of Russian troops near the border, since this all harms the Ukrainian economy. We do not need this panic, said President Zelensky. Rather, this is needed for those people who believe in the myth of the Russian aggression. The Ukrainian officials have talked about a lack of a threat from Russia. In particular, this pertains to the Minister of Defense, the President himself, Mr. Zelensky, who have said themselves that they do not see in this activity that we are being talked about today as a threat. We are prepared to disseminate this to you later. We would urge all colleagues to not use the rostrum of the Security Council to push forward the propaganda beliefs of our colleagues. We would also like to remind members of the Security Council that the Russian delegation in December announced its plans to have an annual discussion of the situation in Ukraine during our presidency of the Council that starts from tomorrow. The 7th anniversary of the adoption of the package of measures of the Minsk agreements will be an excellent opportunity for us to constructively show the Security Council's commitment to 2202, that is the international basis for the Ukrainian settlement. The event is planned for the 17th of February. If our American colleagues really need to say in public any additional information about this, they can fully do this
this during the planned meeting in February.
Призываем всех
We would
здравомыслящих
urge
членов
all
Совета не
sensible
поддерживать
members of the
это
Council not to
провокационное
support this
предложение и проявить
provocative
ответственное
proposal
отношение к Уставу ООН и
and
Совета Безопасности.
treat the UN Charter with respect.
Благодарю вас.
Thank you.
The representative of the Russian Federation, I give the floor to the representative of the US.
Thank you very much, Madam President. As our colleague stated, we have called for this meeting, and we've called for this meeting because of what we have all witnessed over the course of the past few months in terms of the actions of the Russian Federation on the territory of on the border with Ukraine. They indicate that it's in their own territory, but it is also very close to their neighbor's border. It's a neighbor that has been invaded already before. It's a neighbor that has Russian troops occupying their territory. We have had numerous meetings, over 100 meetings over the course of the past few weeks, both with Russian officials and in consultations with our European and Ukrainian colleagues. All of these meetings have been in private. We think it's now time to have a meeting in public and have this discussed in a public forum. We have worked with the Ukrainians at their request to provide assistance to them so that they can prepare for what they see as inevitable, including having provided $200 million in assistance in recent weeks and over $5 billion in assistance since 2014. And that is so that they can be prepared. You've heard from our Russian colleagues that we're calling for this meeting to make you all feel uncomfortable. Imagine how uncomfortable you would be if you had 100,000 troops sitting on your border in the way that these troops are sitting on the border with Ukraine. For us, this is about peace and security. It's about honoring the UN Charter that calls on us as members of the Security Council to protect peace and security. So this is not about antics. It's not about rhetoric. It's not about U.S. and Russia. What this is about is the peace and security of one of our member states. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States. In view of the request and the comments made by members of the Security Council, I intend to put the provisional agenda to a vote. Accordingly, I shall put it to the vote now. Will those in favor of the adoption of the provisional agenda please raise their hand? Those against? Abstention? The result of the voting is as follows. 10 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 3 abstentions. The provisional agenda has been adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Belarus, Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in the meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Recalling the Security Council latest note 507 on its working methods, I wish to encourage all speakers, both members and non-members of the Council, to deliver the statements in 5 minutes or less. Note 507 also encourages briefers to be succinct and to focus on key issues. In this spirit, briefers are further encouraged to limit their initial remarks to 7 to 10 minutes. Everyone is also encouraged to wear a mask at all times, including while delivering remarks. I now give the floor to Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you. Madam President, the United Nations is closely following the ongoing diplomatic discussions on the future of European peace and security architecture among representatives of the Russian Federation, the United States, members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the European Union, and the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe. We hope the outcome of these talks will strengthen peace and security in Europe, including for Ukraine. Madam President, although not an active participant in these exchanges, in all his contacts, the Secretary General has unequivocally supported the ongoing diplomatic efforts at all levels. Still, we remain greatly concerned that, even as these efforts continue, tensions keep escalating and a dangerous military buildup is in the heart of Europe. It is reported that over 100,000 troops and heavy weaponry from the Russian Federation are positioned along the border with Ukraine. Unspecified numbers of Russian troops and weaponry were also reportedly being deployed to Belarus ahead of large-scale joint military exercises in February on the borders with Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. NATO members are reportedly planning additional deployments in Eastern European member states, and NATO has advised that 8,500 troops are now on high alert. Accusations and recriminations among the various actors involved in the ongoing discussions have created uncertainty and apprehension for many that a military confrontation is impending. Madam President, the Secretary General has made clear that there can be no alternative to diplomacy and dialogue to deal with the complex, long-standing security concerns and threat perceptions that have been raised. He has expressed his strong belief that there should not be any military intervention in this context and that diplomacy should prevail. He's been equally explicit that any such intervention by one country in another would be against international law and the United Nations Charter. His expectation is that we all contribute to avoiding confrontation and to creating conditions for a diplomatic solution to end this crisis. We therefore welcome the steps taken so far by all involved to maintain dialogue. We urge and expect all actors to build on these efforts and to remain focused on pursuing diplomatic solutions by engaging in good faith. We further urge all actors to refrain from provocative rhetoric and actions to maximize the chance for diplomacy to succeed. Achieving mutual understanding and lasting, mutually acceptable arrangements is the best way to safeguard regional and international peace and security in the interest of all. Madam President, let me repeat the full commitment of the United Nations to the sovereignty, political independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, in accordance with relevant General Assembly resolutions. It is important, especially at this time, for the international community to intensify its support for the efforts of the Normandy 4 and of the OSCE-led Trilateral Contact Group to ensure the implementation of the Minsk agreements endorsed by this Council in its Resolution 2202. We welcome the recent meeting of the Normandy 4 advisors in Paris and their agreement to reconvene shortly in Berlin as another sign that diplomacy can work. We commend these efforts and those of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Likewise, United Nations agencies in Ukraine are committed to continue delivering on their mandates in accordance with the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, humanity, and independence. Safe, unimpeded humanitarian access must be respected under any circumstances to provide support to the 2.9 million people in need of assistance, with the majority in non-government controlled areas. In this regard, I encourage member states to contribute to the humanitarian response plan. Further, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine continues to document civilian casualties in the conflict area. Madam President, no one is watching the current diplomatic efforts more than the people of Ukraine. They have endured a conflict that has taken over 14,000 lives since 2014, and that tragically is still far from resolution. It is painfully obvious that any new escalation in or around Ukraine would mean more needless killing and destruction. Whatever one's position regarding the current situation or the status quo in eastern Ukraine, this should be inconceivable. The fact that it is not should give us pause. The principles enshrined in the UN Charter, the Helsinki Final Act, and multiple other commitments to safeguard regional and international peace and security are crystal clear. Any escalation or new conflict would deal another serious blow to the architecture so painstakingly built up over the last 75 years to maintain international peace and security just when we need it most. Once again, I'd like to stress the Secretary General's appeal to all concerned to take immediate steps to de-escalate tensions and continue on the diplomatic path. The United Nations stands ready to support all efforts to that end. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Undersecretary General DiCarlo, for your briefing. Colleagues, the situation we're facing in Europe is urgent and dangerous, and the stakes for Ukraine and for every UN member state could not be higher. Russia's actions strike at the very heart of the UN Charter. This is as clear and consequential a threat to peace and security as anyone can imagine. In the wake of World War II, the Council was formed to address precisely the kind of threat that Ukraine now faces. As Article 39 says, the Security Council shall determine the existence of any threat to the peace. Thus, our charge is not only to address conflicts after they occur, but also to prevent them from happening in the first place. This is why today's meeting is so crucial. Russia's aggression today not only threatens Ukraine, it also threatens Europe. It threatens the international order this body is charged with upholding. An order that, if it stands for anything, stands for the principle that one country cannot simply redraw another country's borders by force or make another country's people live under a government they did not choose. We continue to hope Russia chooses the path of diplomacy over the path of conflict in Ukraine, but we cannot just wait and see. It is crucial that this Council address the risk that their aggressive and destabilizing behavior poses across the globe. First, let's be clear about the facts. Russia has assembled a massive military force of more than 100,000 troops along Ukraine's border. These are combat forces and special forces prepared to conduct offensive actions into Ukraine. This is the largest, hear me clearly, mobilization of troops in Europe in decades. And as we speak, Russia is sending even more forces and arms to join them. Russia has already used more than 2,000 rail cars to move troops and weaponry from across Russia to the Ukrainian border. Russia has also moved nearly 5,000 troops into Belarus with short-range ballistic missiles, special forces, and anti-aircraft batteries. We've seen evidence that Russia intends to expand that presence to more than 30,000 troops near the Belarus-Ukraine border, less than 2 hours north of Kyiv, by early February. In addition to military activity, we've also seen a dramatic spike in cyber attacks on Ukraine in recent weeks. Russian military and intelligence services are spreading disinformation through state-owned media and proxy sites, and they are attempting without any factual basis to paint Ukraine and Western countries as the aggressors to fabricate a pretext for attack. Russia's military buildup on the border has been paired with extensive new demands and aggressive rhetoric. This is an escalation and a pattern of aggression that we've seen from Russia again and again. In 2014, Russia illegally invaded and seized Crimea. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia. Russian troops are currently refusing to depart Moldova despite the wishes of the Moldovan people and their democratically elected government. And in the Donbas region of Ukraine, Russian-backed separatists continue to foment and ignore violence toward the Ukrainian people. Recently, Russia has threatened to take military action should its demands not be met. If Russia further invades Ukraine, none of us will be able to say we didn't see it coming, and the consequences will be horrific, which is why this meeting is so important today. Already Russia's war in eastern Ukraine has killed more than 14,000 Ukrainians, nearly 3 million Ukrainians, half of whom are elderly people and children, need food, shelter, and life-saving assistance. Devastating as this situation is, it would pale in comparison to the humanitarian impact of the full-scale land invasion Russia is currently planning in Ukraine. Over the years, Russian leaders have claimed that Ukraine is not a real country and questioned its right to self-determination. So let's be clear. Ukraine is a UN member state that recently celebrated 3 decades of independence. It has a proud people and a rich culture. Ukraine is a sovereign country and a sovereign people entitled to determine their own future without the threat of force. This is not just the conviction that Ukrainians hold. It is a right enshrined by the UN Charter, a right that Russia and every other member of this institution has freely committed to upholding. Our international order is not perfect, but it is grounded in respect for people and countries to govern themselves, to defend themselves, and to associate with whom they choose. All countries have a stake in defending and preserving these principles, and nothing could be more fundamental. What would it mean for the world if former empires had license to start reclaiming territory by force? This would set us down a dangerous path. Russia could, of course, choose a different path, the path of diplomacy. In recent weeks, the United States, along with our European allies and partners and other nations around the globe, concerned by Russia's threat to Ukraine, have continued to do everything we can to resolve this crisis peacefully. In all of these talks, Our messages have been clear and consistent. We seek the path of peace. We seek the path of dialogue. We do not want confrontation, but we will be decisive, swift, and united should Russia further invade Ukraine. We continue to believe there is a diplomatic path out of the crisis caused by Russia's unprovoked military buildup. We're working to pursue diplomacy in every possible venue. But we also know that diplomacy will not succeed in an atmosphere of threat and military escalation. That is why we have brought this situation before the Security Council today. The United States has been clear. If this is truly about Russia's security concerns in Europe, we're offering them an opportunity to address these concerns at the negotiating table. The test of Russia's good faith in the coming days and weeks is whether they will come to that table and stay at that table until we reach an understanding. If they refuse to do so, the world will know why and who is responsible. Fellow members of the Council and other UN member states, we urge you to assess not only Russia's statements, but their actions with clear eyes, to evaluate the risk this presents not just to Ukraine's border and its people, but to all of us, and to speak clearly and forcefully in favor of the path of diplomacy rather than the path of conflict. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States, and I give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Madam President, for convening this open meeting, and thank you, Under Secretary General Di Carlo, for your briefing. Madam President, the primary responsibility of the Security Council is to maintain peace and security with a view to preventing conflicts in the world. We have argued here several times that in terms of prevention, the Council has still a long way to go. The Council has been seized many times to discuss the situation in Ukraine since the beginning of the aggression in 2014, and here we are again today. We express our deep concerns on the military buildup of Russia near Ukraine in recent months. Dozens of battalions have been already dislocated to the Ukrainian border. Military troops are being dispatched from eastern to western part of Russia. This includes heavy combat forces, tanks, artillery, air defense systems, and ballistic missiles. Several thousands of Russian troops have also been sent to Belarus. This movement of troops and weaponry is very worrying, has caused anxiety and fear among people in Ukraine, and justifiably serious international concerns, particularly for us in Europe. Madam President, let me reconfirm our unwavering support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Dear colleagues, in 1994, 27 years ago, Ukraine received security assurances through the Budapest Memorandum, where Russia, together with the US and UK, pledged, and I quote, to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine, in exchange for giving up its nuclear arsenal. The signatories also reaffirmed their commitment to seek UN Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine should it become a victim of an act of aggression. We call on Russia and the Security Council to expressly confirm the respect of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Madam President, it would be wrong to consider the threat of a military attack by Russia against Ukraine as another crisis between Russia and the West. This is a challenge to the European security order and to the whole international security architecture, which is based on the UN Charter. It is an affront to the 1975 Helsinki Final Act and its decalogue, upon which OSCE is founded and where Russia is a part. These last developments on the Russian-Ukrainian border are a well-known playbook. We have seen them in Georgia in 2008 and in Ukraine repeatedly since 2014, unfortunately at the cost of thousands of lives, civilian and military. Russia has used military violence as a means of achieving its political and geopolitical goals. Madam President, Russia is a big country and has a role to play in European and world geopolitics. It can play an important part in making the world a better and a safer place. Unfortunately, it is doing the contrary. The narratives of spheres of influence in Europe or dictating by threats the geostrategic orientation of other countries are tools of another century, of another time, reminiscences of the Cold War. Countries are and should be free to join whichever organization they want, be it NATO, the European Union, CSTO, or CIS. Sovereign countries take decisions by their free will, not under the threat of a gun. Madam President, what is to gain in a potential conflict to which everyone anticipates the disastrous consequences? What can justify the loss of thousands of lives, widespread destruction, severance of relations, continued tensions, including, as it has been made repeatedly clear, severe consequences for Russia itself? No other place knows more about war and its disastrous consequences than this room. Therefore, we must be able to see beyond and seek other means to address issues, however complex they are or seem to be. Albania believes that this crisis should be solved through talks and discussion. Finding solutions through negotiations was our primary focus during the OSCE chairmanship in office in 2020. It remains the same now in the Council. There are several mechanisms to be used through diplomatic efforts. Concrete steps towards de-escalation are needed, paving the ground towards talks in efforts to seek solutions. Such efforts should be made in good faith and not be conducted in a climate of escalation rhetoric. The resumption of the Normandy format meetings last week in Paris was the right step, and we hope that this process will continue. Madam President, we all should bear in mind that the crisis in and around Ukraine has a direct impact on the whole Europe. The instrumentalization of ethnic minorities, targeted cyber attacks, political interference here and there for political gains, and a growing tendency of genocide denial and glorification on war crimes and war criminals, all these are acts that seek destabilization, create tension, and should be treated as a threat to peace and security because they are. This is why we deem of paramount importance to invest in prevention, and I hope this meeting will be part of such genuine efforts, and I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm grateful to Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her briefing. Madam President, the first article of the UN Charter defines our purpose here: to take collective measures for the prevention and removal of threats to the peace. Today, over 100,000 Russian troops are massed on Ukraine's borders. They are equipped with tanks, armoured vehicles, rocket artillery, and short-range ballistic missiles. They are supported by Russian air and maritime long-range strike capabilities. This is not a routine deployment. This is the largest military build-up in Europe in decades. In the best-case scenario, the scale of the Russian forces assembled on three sides of Ukraine is deeply destabilizing. In the worst case, it is preparation for a military invasion of a sovereign country. Madam President, in 2008, Russia told this Council that it was sending peacekeepers into Georgia. In reality, it was invading an independent, democratic country. In 2014, Russia denied to this Council the presence of its forces in Crimea. In reality, its soldiers were annexing part of an independent, democratic Ukraine. Today, Russia denies that its forces are posing a threat to Ukraine. But yet again, we see disinformation, cyber attacks, and destabilizing plots directed against an independent, democratic country. Madam President, the United Kingdom welcomes our discussion today as part of the intense diplomatic effort to ensure Russia de-escalates the situation and avoids conflict. We are unwavering in our support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. At the same time, we have sought dialogue with Russia through the OSCE, the NATO-Russia Council, and bilateral discussions with all levels of the Russian government. We are ready to address mutual security concerns based on existing European security structures and international commitments. This includes our expectation that Russia should address our concerns. We are committed to a constructive dialogue if Russia is genuine about finding a diplomatic solution. This Council has a vital interest in this diplomatic effort. Because let's be clear, this is not a regional issue. Any Russian invasion or act of aggression against Ukraine would be a gross breach of international law and Russia's commitments under the Charter. Conflict would result in terrible bloodshed and destabilize the entire international community. There should be no doubt about how costly such a miscalculation would be for Russia, or how devastating it would be for the people of Ukraine, whose only provocation is to want a democratic future for their country. There would be no winners, only victims. Civilians caught in the crossfire or forced to flee. Families grieving the loss of fallen soldiers on both sides. So, Madam President, we urge Russia to make clear in this Council that it will abide by its obligations under the Charter, that it has no plans to invade Ukraine, that it will refrain from the threat or use of force against its neighbour, that it will not further undermine Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity by military or any other means, and that it will stand down its troops. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam President,
la situation
the
aux
situation
frontières de
at
l'Ukraine
Ukraine's borders
est un motif de vive
is a
préoccupation
source of
pour la
deep
France.
concern for France.
L'accumulation de capacités
The build-up
militaires
of
importantes à la
considerable
frontière
military
d'un État
capacities along the
souverain
border
voisin
of a neighbouring
constitue
sovereign
un
state
comportement
represents
menaçant.
threatening
Elle
conduct.
soulève des
It
interrogations
raises
légitimes
legitimate
sur les
questions
intentions de la Russie,
on Russia's
d'autant
intentions,
plus que ce pays a déjà
particularly
porté atteinte
since
à
this
l'intégrité
country has
territoriale de
already
l'Ukraine dans le passé.
infringed the territorial integrity of Ukraine in the past.
La France réaffirme son
France
soutien plein
reaffirms
et entier
its
à
full
l'indépendance,
support
à la
for the
souveraineté
independence,
et à l'intégrité
sovereignty,
territoriale
and
de
territorial
l'Ukraine
integrity
dans
of
ses
Ukraine
frontières internationalement
within its
reconnues.
internationally recognized
Elle appelle
borders.
la Russie à s'engager dans
France
une
calls on
désescalade
Russia
de
to
la
engage
situation,
in
à
de-escalating the
respecter le droit
situation, to
international
abide by
et à
international
participer
law,
de manière
and to
constructive au
participate
dialogue dans le cadre
constructively
des
in dialogue
mécanismes
within the
internationaux
framework
établis.
of established
La
international
priorité
mechanisms.
est d'œuvrer collectivement
The priority
à une
is to work
désescalade
together
rapide.
towards a swift
Le président
de-escalation.
Macron s'y est employé
President Macron
au cours des derniers
has made
jours,
efforts in that
lors de
regard
son
over the last
déplacement à
few
Berlin,
days, during
puis
his trip to
de son
Berlin,
entretien
and
téléphonique
then
avec
during
le
his
président
telephone
Poutine.
call with President
Cette
Putin.
réunion du Conseil de sécurité
This
doit également
Security Council
s'inscrire dans cet
meeting should
objectif.
also be in line with
La
this
France
objective.
soutient tous les efforts de dialogue
France supports
dans les
all
différents
efforts
cadres
at
existants
dialogue within
et
the
souhaite que
different
les Européens
existing
y prennent toute
frameworks,
leur
and
part.
we hope that Europeans
Dans
will
le
be fully
cadre du format
involved.
Normandie,
In the
qui
context
rassemble
of
l'Allemagne, la
the
France,
Normandy
la
format that
Russie et
brings
l'Ukraine,
together Germany,
ces
France,
efforts ont
Russia and
permis,
Ukraine,
lors de la
these
réunion du
efforts
26 janvier à
enabled at
Paris,
the 26th of
de
January meeting
s'accorder
in Paris
sur une
an
déclaration de
agreement
soutien
on
au
a
respect
statement of
inconditionnel du
support
cessez-le-feu
for the
et de la mise
unconditional
en œuvre
compliance with
des
the
accords de
ceasefire and the
Minsk.
implementation of the Minsk
Nous
agreements.
poursuivrons les efforts en
We
ce
will
sens
pursue
lors de la
efforts in this
prochaine réunion
direction at
prévue
the
à
next
brève
meeting
échéance à
planned to be
Berlin.
held in short order in Berlin.
Le dialogue quelles que soient les
dialogue,
enceintes où il est
regardless
conduit,
of the venue
doit
in which it takes
respecter les
place,
principes
must
fondamentaux
observe the
sur lesquels
fundamental
repose la
principles
sécurité
underpinning
européenne,
European
tels
security
qu'établis dans
as
la Charte des
established
Nations
in
Unies,
the Charter of the United
dans les
Nations,
documents fondateurs
in
de
the founding
l'OSCE,
documents
y
of
compris
the
l'acte final
OSCE,
d'Helsinki
including
et
the
la Charte de
Helsinki
Paris.
Final Act and the
Ces
Charter of
principes
Paris.
comprennent notamment
These principles
l'égalité souveraine
comprise,
et
in particular,
l'intégrité territoriale
sovereign
des États,
equality and the territorial integrity
l'inviolabilité
of
des
states,
frontières,
the inviolability of borders,
le non-recours à la menace
the
ou à l'emploi de la force,
non-recourse to
et la
the
liberté
threat
des
or the
États
use
de
of
choisir
force, and the
ou de
freedom of
modifier
states
leurs
to either
propres
choose
dispositifs
or
de
change
sécurité.
their own security
Ils ne
measures.
sont ni négociables,
They are
ni
neither
sujets à
negotiable
révision
nor subject
ou à
to any
réinterprétation.
revision nor
La
reinterpretation.
notion de sphère
Notions
d'influence
of
n'a
spheres of
pas sa
influence
place au
have
XXIe
no
siècle.
place in the 21st century.
Si la Russie ne choisit pas la voie
If
du
Russia does
dialogue
not choose
et
the
du
path of
respect du droit
dialogue and
international, la
respect for
réponse sera
international
forte et
law,
unie.
the response
Toute
will
nouvelle
be
atteinte à
robust
la
and
souveraineté
united.
et
Any
à
fresh
l'intégrité
infringement
territoriale de
of the
l'Ukraine
sovereignty and
aura
territorial
des
integrity of
conséquences
Ukraine
massives et un coût
by Russia
sévère.
will have massive
Les Européens
consequences and a
travaillent à des
severe
mesures
cost.
restrictives
Europeans
coordonnées
are
et se
working on
tiennent prêts,
coordinated restrictive
conjointement
measures
avec leurs
and stand
partenaires, à
ready together
réagir.
with their partners to react.
Si la voie du dialogue
If
et de la
the path of
coopération est
dialogue and
choisie,
cooperation
l'Union
is
européenne
chosen,
est
the
prête
European
à
Union
s'engager
stands ready to
pour
engage
développer
to
ses
develop
relations avec
its
la Russie
relations with
sur la
Russia
base
on the
d'une approche
basis
unie,
of a
à long
united,
terme et
long-term
stratégique
and strategic
selon les
approach
5 principes
in accordance
directeurs de
with
2016.
the 5 guiding
Dans le
principles from
contexte de
2016.
menaces et de tensions
In the
actuelles, la
context
France
of current
réaffirme
threats and
sa
tensions,
solidarité
France
avec le
reaffirms its
peuple et le
solidarity with
gouvernement
the
ukrainien.
Ukrainian people and government.
Avec nos partenaires
With our
européens,
European
nous
partners, we
continuerons à
will
nous
continue
mobiliser
to
en soutien à
mobilize in
l'Ukraine,
support of
notamment par
Ukraine,
la voie du soutien
particularly through
aux réformes.
support
Je vous
for
remercie.
reforms. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France, and I give the floor to the representative of India.
Thank you, Madam President. We have been closely following the evolving developments relating to Ukraine, including through ongoing high-level security talks between the Russian Federation and the United States, as well as under the Normandy format in Paris. India's interest is in finding a solution that can provide for immediate de-escalation of tensions, taking into account the legitimate security interests of all countries and aimed towards securing long-term peace and stability in the region and beyond. We have also been in touch with all concerned parties. It is our considered view that the issues can only be resolved through diplomatic dialogue. In this context, we welcome the efforts underway, including under the Minsk Agreement and the Normandy format. Flowing from the recently concluded meeting in Paris under the Normandy format, we also welcome the unconditional observance of the July 2020 ceasefire and reaffirmation of Minsk agreements as the basis of work under the ongoing Normandy format, in particular, commitment of all sides to reduce disagreements on the way forward. We also welcome their agreement to meet in Berlin in 2 weeks. We urge all parties to continue to engage through all diplomatic channels and to keep working towards the full implementation of the Minsk package. Quiet and constructive diplomacy is the need of the hour. Any steps that increase tension may best be avoided by all sides in the larger interest of securing international peace and security. More than 20,000 Indian students and nationals live and study in different parts of Ukraine, including in its border areas. The well-being of Indian nationals is of priority to us. Madam President, I reiterate our call for the peaceful resolution of the situation by sincere and sustained diplomatic efforts to ensure that concerns of all sides are resolved through constructive dialogue. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank the representative of India, and I give the floor to the representative of Ghana.
Thank you very much, Madam President. A few moments ago, this Council voted to adopt the agenda for this meeting to consider the situation in Ukraine. Our responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security makes it imperative to encourage the path of dialogue and preventive diplomacy. That is the only way to end the tensions bridge the differences between the parties, and forge a unified and pacific position on the situation in Ukraine. Let me begin by thanking Rosemary DiCarlo, USG for Political Affairs and Peace Building, for the briefing. I also welcome the participation of the representatives of Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, and Lithuania in this meeting. Ghana has been following closely the situation in Ukraine. I've also listened carefully to the briefing we just received from the Secretariat, as well as the statement of delegations that have spoken before me. We have paid careful attention to the perspectives of the key parties to the situation and hope that at the end of this meeting, the views of members of this Council will be closer to each other than when we first began. We note from the situation in Ukraine that while there has been a buildup of Russian troops at the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine, those troops are presently within the national territory of the Russian Federation. We also have taken note that while the military buildup of the troops of the Russian Federation are within its borders, this has caused for Ukraine and other parties a concern over the intentions of the buildup and its prospective implications on international peace and security. We therefore welcome the ongoing dialogue between the Russian Federation and the United States to address primary and secondary security concerns that have implications on the situation in Ukraine, as well as the recent face-to-face dialogue between the representatives of the Russian Federation and Ukraine under the Normandy format in Paris, after several months of no contact, to enhance trust and remove possibilities of an accidental incident. We note with concern the implications the situation has had on the economy of Ukraine and neighboring markets, and welcome in this regard the call by the President of Ukraine for an easing of the strong narratives on the situation. This must be a time for confidence building to facilitate a restoration of normalcy for the people of Ukraine. In concluding, Madam President, Ghana believes that in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of this organization, differences between member states should only be resolved through peaceful means. We remain encouraged by the ongoing diplomatic engagement between the parties and reiterate our support for those efforts, which should also take into account the delicate nature of the situation. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of Ghana. I give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thanks also to Under-Secretary General DiCarlo for your briefing. Madam President, today's discussion is an important opportunity for the Council to address the developing situation at Ukraine's borders, which has become a matter of profound international concern. Let me underline at the outset that Ireland, along with our EU partners, is a strong and unwavering supporter of Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognised borders. At this moment of rising tension on Ukraine's frontiers, arising from Russia's military build-up, Ireland calls for calm, de-escalation and the pursuit of diplomacy. We call also for constructive and determined engagement on all dialogue tracks, including the Normandy format and the OSCE. Ireland is fully committed to the core principles enshrined in the UN Charter. These include the sovereign, equality and territorial integrity of states. We recall today that these principles were agreed collectively and freely by all members of the United Nations. Moreover, European security is built on a series of essential commitments and obligations. It is the fundamental right of a sovereign and independent state to chart its own path in the world, to choose its own foreign policy, and to make arrangements for the security and defence of its territory. The Helsinki Final Act, one of the foundational documents of the OSCE, confirms the obligation of states, and I quote, to respect each other's sovereign equality and the right of every state to juridical equality, to territorial integrity, and to freedom and political independence, end of quote. Subsequent agreements, including the Charter of Paris and the Charter of European Security, agreed in Istanbul in 1999, reaffirm the core principles and underpinning collective European security. Madam President, earlier this month, Ireland marked 100 years of a hard-won independence. Just as we would not accept another state determining our foreign and security policy, Ukraine similarly has the sovereign right to choose its own policies. In this Council, we are too often faced with the terrible humanitarian consequences of violent conflict, usually where diplomacy and dialogue have failed. Force is never the answer. It is not the answer now. What is needed now, above all, is a negotiated diplomatic solution that reinforces our collective security in Europe. We have the institutions and the mechanisms within which to pursue this solution. Let us use them. Absent that, it will be innocent civilians who once again pay the awful price of conflict. Madam President, that is not a prospect any of us wish to contemplate. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ireland, and I give the floor to the representative of China.
谢谢主席女士。
Thank you, Madam
主席女士
President. Madam President,
中方反对
China
安理会
opposes
根据
the
美国的
Security
要求
Council's
举行这
holding
次
of
公开
this
会。
open meeting as requested by the
美
United
国常
States.
驻联合国代
The
表在
permanent
1月
representative
27日
of the
致
U.S.
信
to
安
the
理会
UN
主
in her
席
letter to the President of the
称
Council dated
美
January
方要求安理
27th
会举行公
claimed
开
that the
会的
reason
理由
why
是
the U.S. is asking
俄
the
罗
Council
斯
to hold this
在乌
open
克兰
meeting
边界的
was
兵
that
力部署
Russia's
对
deployment
国
of
际
troops
和
along
平
the
与安
Ukrainian
全
border
构成威
posed a
胁。
threat to international peace and
中
security.
方不能认
China
同这样的看
cannot
法。
align itself with this point of
近期
view.
围绕乌克兰问
Recently,
题确
there
实
have
出
indeed
现一
been
些
some
紧张
tensions
局势，
over the issue of
我
Ukraine,
们正在
and we
关注
are
引
paying
起紧张局
attention
势
to
的
what
原
exactly
因。
are causing the tensions.
以美国为首的一些国
Some
家
countries,
声称
led
最
by the
近在乌
United
克
States,
兰会
have
发生
claimed
战争，
that there will soon be a war
但
in
俄
Ukraine.
罗斯已经一再的
Russia
声明，
has repeatedly
俄方没
stated
有
that
发
it
起
has
军事
no
行动的
plans
计
to
划。
launch any military action.
乌克兰方面
And
也明确
Ukraine
表
has
示，
made it
他们
clear
不需
that
要
it
战
does
争。
not need a war.
在此情况下，
Under such
有关国家
circumstances,
坚称可能
what is
发
the
生战争
basis，for the countries concerned
依据
to
何在？
insist that there may be a war?
我们注意到，
We
美国、
note
乌克
that
兰
the
和
United
有关
States,
欧洲国家以
Ukraine,
及北
and the
约
relevant European countries,
正在
as well
同
as
俄罗斯
NATO,
进行不
are
同形
having
式的外
varying
交接
forms
触
of。diplomatic contacts with Russia.
相关各方之
The
间
parties
应
concerned
该坚
should
持通过
persist
对话谈
in
判
seeking to resolve their
寻求
differences
解决分
through
歧。
dialogues and negotiations.
当前急需的
What we
是
urgently
静
need
悄悄
now
外
is
交，
quiet
而不
diplomacy,
是
but
麦
not
克风外交。
microphone diplomacy.
很多安理
This
会
is
成员
the
都持
viewpoint
这一看法，
held by many members of
并
the
为此
Council who have
做
also
出了
made
不懈努力。
unrelenting efforts
遗憾
towards
的是
this end.
美方没有接
Regrettably,
受
the U.S.
这样的
did not
建
accept
设性建议。
such a constructive proposal.
在对话谈判正在进
At a
行，
time when dialogues and
同时还
negotiations
有
are
待取得积极
underway
进展的情况
and
下，
concrete
安理
progress
会
is
举
yet to be
行
made,
公开会，
the holding of
显
such
然
an
不
open
利于
meeting by the
为
Council
对
is
话谈
clearly
判
not
营造有利
conducive
气
to
氛，
creating a favorable
也
environment for
不利
dialogues and
于推动
negotiations,
化解
nor is it
紧
conducive
张
to
局势。
diffusing the tension.
中方再次呼吁
China once
有关
again
各方保
calls
持
on
冷
all
静，
parties concerned to
不
remain
做任
calm,
何
not to do
刺激局势
anything
紧
to
张、
aggravate
渲染
tension
炒作
or
危
hype
急
up
的
the
事
crisis.
情，并在
But
充分考虑彼此
to
合理安全关切和相互
properly
尊重的基
resolve
础
their
上，
differences through
通过平
consultations
等
on
协
an
商
equal footing on
妥
the
善
basis
解
of
决分歧。
fully taking into account each other's legitimate security concerns and
主
on
席
the
女士
basis of mutual respect.
中方在乌克兰问题上的
Madam
立场
President,
是一贯的，
China's position on
解决乌克兰问
Ukraine
题
is consistent.
还是要
To
回
solve
到
this issue, we
落
still
实
need
新
to
明斯克
return
协
to
议
the
这一
origin
原
of
点上。
implementing the new Minsk
新
agreement.
明斯克协议
This
得到
agreement,
安理会
endorsed by
第
the Security Council
2202
in
号
its
决议
Resolution
的合可，
2202, is a
是各方公认的有约束力的基础性政治
foundational
文件，
political document
理
recognized
应
by
得
all
到切
parties
实执
and
行。
should really be
中方
effectively
支持所
implemented.
有符合这一协议
China
方向
supports all
和精
efforts
神
in
的
line
努
with
力，
this direction and
希
spirit of
望
this
有关
agreement
各
and
方
hopes
展
that all
现执
parties
行
concerned
新明
will
斯克
show
协议
their
的
positive
积极
willingness
意愿，
to implement this
协
new
商解
Minsk
决协议执
agreement
行 过程
resolve
中
their
出现的
differences
分歧，
arising from the
推动
implementation of the
将新
agreement
明斯
through
克协议
consultation and
落到
promote
实处
the。actual implementation of this new Minsk
北约
agreement.
扩员 是处理当前紧张局势难以绕开的问题。北约为冷战时期的产物，北约扩员是集团政治的集中体现。我们认为，一国安全不能以损害他国安全为代价，地区安全更不能以强化甚至扩张军事集团为保障。在21世纪的今天，各方应当摒弃冷战思维，通过谈判形成均衡、有效、可持续的欧洲安全体制。俄罗斯的合理关切应当得到重视和解决。谢谢你，李欣女士。
Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of China, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас, госпожа
председатель. Thank you, Madam President. We would like to thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing.
Я прежде всего хочу поблагодарить те страны, которые нашли себе
who conducted themselves
возможность
and deemed it possible to vote against or abstain against the proposal of the US to discuss this topic today.
У кого-то может сложиться впечатление, как будто бы Россия опасается обсуждать ситуацию на Украине, и поэтому затеяла процедурное голосование. Россия вовсе не отказывается обсуждать ситуацию на Украине. Но нам совершенно непонятно, что мы сегодня здесь обсуждаем. И зачем вообще мы здесь находимся. Как я уже говорил, на 17 февраля мы запланировали заседание в ходе нашего председательства о 7-й годовщине реализации Минских соглашений, где мы как раз можем поговорить о ситуации с украинским урегулированием. Но сегодняонешнее заседание вовсе не об этом. В последнее время мы сталкиваемся с весьма необычной даже по меркам нашего неспокойного времени ситуацией. Перемещение российских войск в пределах нашей собственной территории, неоднократно происходившие и ранее в тех или иных масштабах, и не вызывавшие никакой истерики. Военнослужащих войск, которые находятся в местах своей дислокации, где они были и раньше, а вовсе не на российско-украинской границе. Так вот, это перемещение российских войск на нашей территории выдается нашими американскими и западными коллегами за подтверждение якобы планируемой военной акции и даже агрессии. Причем американский постпред сказал это так, как будто эта агрессия уже состоялась. Я внимательно слушал его. Военные акции России против Украины, до которой, как они всех убеждают, остались считанные недели, если не дни. При этом никаких доказательств, подтверждающих столь серьезное обвинение, не приводится. Однако это не мешает раздуть истерию до такой степени, что конкретные экономические последствия уже начали ощущать на себе наши украинские соседи. Наши западные коллеги говорят о необходимости деэскалации, но прежде всего сами нагнетают напряженность, риторику и провоцируют эскалацию. Разговоры о грядущей войне сами по себе провокационны. Вы как будто призываете к этому, хотите и ждете, когда это произойдет. Как будто вы хотите сделать реальностью ваши доводы. Это несмотря на то, что мы постоянно опровергаем эти обвинения. И это при том, что ни одной угрозы о планированном вторжении на Украину из уст кого-либо из российских политиков или общественных деятелей за все это время не прозвучало. Наоборот, мы на всех уровнях категорически опровергали подобные обвинения. Делаем это сейчас. Все, кто утверждает обратное, вводят вас в заблуждение. Вообще, если бы не наши западные коллеги, которые спровоцировали и поддержали в 2014 году кровавый антиконституционный переворот, приведший к власти в Киеве националистов, радикалов, русофобов и просто
Nazis, rather.
Мы бы и по сей день жили бы в духе добрососедства
If they'd not done
и
this, then we
взаимовыгодного
to date would be living in a spirit of good neighbourly relations and mutual
Однако
cooperation.
кому-то на
However,
Западе
some
подобный
in the West
сценарий
just
явно не по
don't
душе.
clearly like this positive scenario.
Происходящее сегодня еще одна
What's
попытка
happening
вбить
today is
клин
yet
между
another
Россией и
attempt to drive a
Украиной.
wedge between Russia and
Из-за
Ukraine.
геополитических игр
Thanks
наши
to their
соседи страдают вот уже 7
political
лет.
games, our colleagues have been suffering for some 7 years now.
Украинцам
The
активно промывают
Ukrainians
мозги,
are actively being brainwashed.
культивируют
They're
русофобские радикальные
cultivated
настроения,
Russophobia and radical
приучая к
thinking,
мысли о том,
leading to the belief
что для светлого
that for
будущего
Ukraine to
Украине
have a
нужно
bright
не налаживать
future, it
отношения с
mustn't
соседями,
establish relations with
а
its
любой
neighbours,
ценой
but rather
стремиться
at
в
any
Евросоюз и
cost
НАТО.
strive to join the EU and NATO.
Запрещает русский
They
язык
are banning
в родной или
Russian,
значительной
which is a
части,
native
если
language
не
for
большинства
a
украинцев.
significant, if not the majority of people in Ukraine.
Провоцирует церковный
They
раскол,
are causing an Orthodox split, church split, or divide.
делают героями тех,
They
кто
are
воевал
making
на стороне
heroes out
Гитлера,
of those people who fought on the side of
уничтожал
Hitler,
евреев,
who
поляков,
destroyed Jews,
украинцев и русских.
Poles, Ukrainians, and Russians.
Интересы
The
украинского
interests of
народа
the
в этой
Ukrainian people
разрушительной
in
игре
this
наши западные
destructive
коллеги
game is
не
something that
учитывают.
our Western colleagues are not taking
Их
into
задача не
consideration. Their
допустить
aim is to
естественного,
prevent the
братского
natural,
сосуществования
brotherly
наших двух стран и народов,
coexistence of our two people,
стран и народов,
brotherly peoples,
стран и народов,
peoples and countries,
который
rather,
разрушил бы планы
which
по
would
ослаблению
destroy
России,
their plans to weaken Russia
формирование вокруг нее
and
дуги
would
нестабильности.
create an arc of instability around it.
Собственно, ничего нового
There's
мы здесь не
nothing
видим.
that
Подобные
we're
действия
seeing
в
that's
духе
new
«разделяй и
here,
властвуй»
in the same spirit of divide and conquer,
были
the
divide and rule.
divide and rule.
Были характерны для западных
This
государств.
same spirit was characteristic
ранее.
for Western powers, or Western states rather, earlier.
Примечательно также, что
It's
наши
also
американские
noteworthy that our
коллеги
American
искусственно
colleagues
вписывают самими
artificially
же
are
созданную
getting
мнимую
involved in
напряженность
the sham
на
tension that they
российско-украинской
themselves created
границе
on the Russian-Ukrainian border.
в запущенный по нашему
There
настоянию
was
переговорный
the
процесс
negotiation process
по
put forward by
обеспечению для
ourselves to
России
ensure
юридически обязывающих
for Russia
гарантий
legally
безопасности.
binding security guarantees.
Ими сознательно
They
создается
deliberately
впечатление,
are
что
creating
Москва
the
якобы
impression that
специально нагнетает
Moscow
напряженность,
apparently is specifically or
чтобы
on
потом
purpose stirring up
разменять ее на
tension
большую уступчивость США и
that
НАТО.
means that it can be more accessible for the
Если
US
вы
and
посмотрите
NATO.
на
If
график и
you
на
look
сам этот
at
переговорный
the
процесс,
timetable for the
то
negotiation
вы
process, you'll
увидите,
see
что
that
подобные измышления
such
в корне неверны.
considerations are fundamentally untrue.
Все как раз
The
наоборот.
situation, in fact, is
Наши
completely the
западные
opposite. Our
коллеги
Western
пытаются
colleagues
на
are
гребне этой
trying
волны
on the wave of on the top of this wave
свести наш
of
диалог
hysteria to
исключительно к
boil
вопросу
our
так
dialogue solely
называемого
down
урегулирования
to so-called
ситуации на
settlement
границе с
of the
Украиной.
situation on the border with Ukraine.
Наши же требования по
Our
безопасности
security
гораздо шире,
demands are much broader.
и не вступление
The
Украины в НАТО
non-accession of Ukraine to NATO,
и не размещение
the
на ее территории
non-deployment in its
иностранных войск
territory of foreign troops.
всего лишь один
All of this
элемент
is just
назревших
one part
договоренностей,
of the agreement
которые могли бы
that
кардинально
could
улучшить
fundamentally improve
военно-политическую
the
обстановку в
military-political
Европе,
situation in
да и в мире
Europe
в целом.
and for the world as a whole.
А такого рода
And this type
договоренности
of agreement
шла речь на саммитах ОБСЕ в
is
Стамбуле и
something that we
Астане,
talked about in the Astana, Istanbul, and
где
OSCE
помимо
summits,
свободы
where
выбора
apart
союзов
from the freedom to
содержалось
choose one's
положение о том,
allies or alliances was also the stipulation
о том, что
that
безопасность одних государств не
the
может
security
обеспечиваться
guarantees
за счет
of
безопасности других.
some states should not be carried out to the detriment of the security of other states.
Раз уж наши американские коллеги
Since our
собрали нас
American
сегодня, то пусть они
colleagues
предъявят
convened
хоть
us
какие-то
today, let them
доказательства,
show us
кроме
any
измышлений,
evidence apart from
о том,
bogus
что Россия
narratives
собирается напасть
that
на
Russia
Украину.
is intending to attack Ukraine.
В выступлении моей
In the
американской
statement of my
коллеги
American
было
colleague,
достаточно
there was a
обвинений
significant
в агрессивных
hodgepodge of
действиях
accusations of aggressive
России,
actions by
но ни
Russia,
одного
but
конкретного
no
факта.
specific fact
given.
Incidentally,
I'd like to put a question not only to our US colleague, but also to those. Where did you get the figure of 100,000 troops that are deployed, as you state, on the Russian-Ukrainian border, although that is not the case? We have never cited that figure. We've never confirmed that figure.
Мы помним эти приемы еще с тех пор, как покойный госсекретарь США Колин Пауэлл размахивал в этом зале пробиркой с неизвестным веществом в качестве доказательства наличия ОМОНов. Оружие так и не нашли, но что стало со страной, всем хорошо известно. Похоже, что и Украину наши американские коллеги готовы принести в жертву своим геополитическим интересам. Иначе сложно объяснить, почему, собирая нас сегодня, инициаторы встречи не прислушались даже к мнению президента Украины, просившего Запад не нагнетать панику. Which has already had a harmful impact on the economic situation in the country. Иначе также сложно объяснить, зачем наши коллеги из США и ряда других стран активно накачивают Украину оружием и боеприпасами. И при этом говорят об этом с гордостью. Оружием, которое та с готовностью применяет против мирного населения на востоке собственной страны. И все это делается в нарушении Минских договоренностей, утвержденных Советом Безопасности ООН, в качестве единственной основы для мирного урегулирования внутриукраинского
the internal Ukrainian conflict.
Моя американская коллега упоминала, что в ходе конфликта погибло 14 тысяч человек. Я бы хотел порекомендовать ей почитать доклады специальной мониторинговой миссии ОБСЕ и посмотреть, на какой стороне сколько погибло людей.
How many people died on each side out of these 14,000? Most of these people are civilians in Donbass who died from shelling from the Ukrainian armed forces.
Госпожа председатель, маневры США вокруг созыва нашей сегодняшней встречи особенно неадекватны и лицемерны на фоне того, что именно американцы имеют рекордные показатели присутствия войск за пределами своей территории. Американские военные, советники, вооружения, в том числе ядерные, зачастую расположены за тысячи километров от Вашингтона. Не говоря уже о том, что военные авантюры США унесли десятки и сотни тысяч жизней граждан стран, куда они несли мир и демократию. США неоднократно, в том числе последние годы, применяли силу в отношении других государств без санкций Совета Безопасности ООН. В их арсенале односторонние санкции и принудительные меры, угрозы, исполнять которые, как приговор некого Верховного суда, они пытаются заставить всех. Согласно данным американских экспертов, 84 из 193 стран-членов ООН в той или иной степени подвергались оккупации или агрессии США, а в 191 государстве в 20-21 веках так или иначе размещались американские войска. По общедоступным в интернете данным, США содержат около 750 военных баз в более чем 80 странах мира. Общее число размещенных за рубежом военнослужащих США за границей 175 тысяч. 175. 175,000. Из них более 60 тысяч в Европе. Объем военного бюджета США в 2020 году составил 778 миллиардов долларов.
$700 million. 778.
Российского 61 миллиард, то есть меньше, чем в 12 раз. Вот это примеры совершенно очевидные и конкретные угрозы международному миру и безопасности. Что же касается призывов урегулировать кризис вокруг Украины, то мы двумя руками за. Но у этого кризиса есть только одно измерение – внутри Украины. Исправить ситуацию можно исключительно через выполнение Киевом уже упомянутых мной Минских договоренностей, предусматривающих прежде всего прямой диалог с Донецком и Луганском.
direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk.
Другого пути нет.
There is no other option.
Если наши западные коллеги подталкивают Киев к саботажу Минских договоренностей, чем украинские власти охотно пользуются. Чем украинские власти охотно пользуются.
They're willingly doing.
То это может закончиться самым плачевным образом для Украины.
End in the absolute worst way for Ukraine.
И не потому, что кто-то ее разрушит,
because somebody has destroyed it,
а потому, что она разрушит себя сама.
It would have destroyed itself.
И Россия здесь абсолютно ни при чем. Не пытайтесь перекладывать вину с больной головы на здоровую. Обо всем об этом, однако, мы подробно поговорим 17 февраля в ходе давно запланированного нами ежегодного заседания Совета Безопасности по выполнению резолюции 2202.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I give the floor to the representative of Gabon.
Merci Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam
Je remercie
President.
Madame
I'd
la
like to
Secrétaire
thank
Générale Adjointe
the
Rosemary
Undersecretary
Di
General
Carlo pour
Rosemary
son
Di Carlo
exposé.
for her briefing.
Madame la Présidente, mon pays
Madam President,
suit avec beaucoup
my
d'attention
country
la
is
situation
following
qui prévaut
closely
aux
the
frontières de
prevailing
l'Ukraine et de la
situation
Russie
at the borders of
et a
Ukraine
pris
and
connaissance
Russia.
des informations
We have taken note
relatives
of the
à une
information
importante
on
mobilisation de
a
troupes russes
considerable
aux frontières de
mobilization
l'Ukraine,
of Russian troops
laissant
at Ukraine's
présager
borders
l'imminence d'une action
that
militaire.
portend imminent
Ces
military
informations
action.
alarmantes sont
This
accompagnées sur
alarming
le terrain
information
par
is
une
accompanied on the
véritable
ground
effervescence
by a
assortie de
true
déploiement
maelstrom of
de
activity
moyens
along with the
financiers
deployment
importants
of troops,
et
military
d'équipements militaires
hardware
de pays
and
amis
military
de
hardware
l'Ukraine.
from friendly countries of Ukraine.
L'escalade verbale et la vive tension
The
qui en
consequential
découle polarisent une
rhetorical
importante activité
escalation and
diplomatique
acute
qui se
tensions
traduit
are
par différentes
polarizing
initiatives,
important
dont le
diplomatic
format de
activity
Normandie,
conducted
dans le
through
cadre de la
various
mise en œuvre des
initiatives,
accords de
including the
Minsk.
Normat Normandy,
Face à cette situation de
the
tension
Normandy
particulièrement
format
préoccupante,
in the framework
mon
of the
pays,
implementation of the Minsk agreements.
conscient des
In the
enjeux
face of
et du
this
potentiel des forces en
situation
présence,
of particularly worrisome
appelle
tensions, my
l'ensemble des
country,
parties
aware of the
prenantes
challenges
à la
and the
retenue
potential of
et
the
à
forces in
privilégier
place,
les voies du
calls
dialogue
on
et de la
all
négociation
stakeholders to
en vue
demonstrate
de
restraint
préserver
and to
la
favour the path
stabilité
of dialogue
et
and
la paix dans la
negotiation
région.
in order to preserve peace
C'est
and
le moment
stability in the
pour
region.
la communauté internationale
It is
et
time
ses
for the
membres
international community and its
d'activer
members
les
to
canaux de la
activate
diplomatie
the
préventive
channels of preventive
tels que
diplomacy,
prévus par le chapitre
such
6
as those
de la Charte des
provided
Nations
by
Unies consacrée
Chapter
au
6
règlement
of the
pacifique des
UN
différends.
Charter enshrined
Il
in
est évident
the peaceful
que
settlement of
l'efficacité
disputes.
de cette
It is
diplomatie préventive
clear that the
est
effectiveness
tributaire
of
non
this
seulement de la
preventive
bonne foi
diplomacy
des
depends
protagonistes,
not only
mais
on
surtout
the
du
good
tact,
faith of
de
the
la
protagonists,
sérénité
but
et du
also
cadre de sa mise en
on
œuvre.
the tactful and
La
calm
dualité de
conduct
rhétorique,
as well as the framework within which
celle
such
alarmante
diplomacy
concernant
occurs.
l'imminence d'une
We
action
see
militaire
a
en
two-sided
Ukraine, d'une
rhetoric.
part,
On the one hand, an
et
alarming
celle de
rhetoric on
démenti,
the
qui
imminence
est
of military
juxtaposée,
action in
d'autre
Ukraine,
part,
and on the other, a
amplifie
denial
la
from the
fragmentation
other
de ce
side.
Conseil
These
au moment
intensify
où
the
les peuples du
fragmentation of
monde
this Council,
attendent de lui
just as the
un
people of the world
consensus
are
et
expecting
une
from
action
our
résolue
Council
à la
a
dimension des
consensus and
dévastations causées
resolute
par les
action
guerres et
commensurate
crises
with the
qui
havoc
ensanglantent
wrought
plusieurs
by
régions de la
wars
planète.
and crises that are bringing
La
bloodshed
force de ce
to several
Conseil
regions of the
réside
planet.
dans son unité.
The strength of this
C'est
Council
l'unité
resides in
et
its
non la
unity.
fragmentation
It is
qui hisse ce
unity and
Conseil
not
à la hauteur de son
fragmentation
mandat
that make
au
this
service des
Council
peuples du monde.
worthy of its mandate,
Nous
working
croyons
for
que
the
la
peoples of the
diplomatie,
world.
dans
We
ses
believe that
formes les plus
diplomacy
pratiques
in its
et
most
efficientes,
practical and
est à même
efficient
de ramener la
forms
sérénité
is
aux frontières
capable
de
of bringing
l'Ukraine.
calm to the
Pour
borders of
terminer, je
Ukraine.
voudrais redonner écho
To
ici
conclude,
à
I would
l'appel
like
lancé
to echo
vendredi dernier
here
par le
the
président
appeal
ukrainien,
made last
exhortant
Friday by
à
the
garder le
Ukrainian
sens de la
president,
mesure et à
asking
ne
for
pas
parties
amplifier
to
la panique.
exercise
Je vous
restraint
remercie,
and to
Madame la
refrain
Présidente.
from whipping up panic. Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Gabon, and I give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And let me also thank USG Rosemary Di Carlo for the briefing he has put forward to the Council this morning. Geopolitical tensions and threats to international peace and security require the Security Council to engage promptly and timely. Open references to military actions, unilateral economic sanctions, and other measures are developments that should be avoided under the UN Charter. The Security Council must fulfill its primary objective, which is to prevent war. There is a general and urgent need to resort to meaningful dialogue with and between the parties directly involved in the escalation of tensions.
We urge all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to engage constructively in talks aimed at resolving their differences. There is room to restore confidence and find a lasting diplomatic solution to this crisis. For that, we need political will and genuine commitment from all sides. Brazil encourages all parties to strictly observe international law. It is imperative to apply the principles enshrined in the Charter consistently, in a non-selective manner. The prohibition of use of force, the peaceful resolution of disputes, and the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the protection of human rights are pillars of our collective security system. Brazil also highlights the need for good faith in order to address legitimate security concerns of all parties, including Russia's and Ukraine's. We encourage parties to pursue genuine talks on the implementation of the Minsk agreements. Security Council Resolution 2202, which provided useful guidelines to address the situation in eastern Ukraine, is also a valuable tool in the diplomatic efforts to overcome the situation. Brazil welcomes the resumption of talks in the Normandy format and the renewed commitment to the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. Despite the sensitive and difficult nature of the issue on our agenda today, I would like to conclude with a note of hope. It has been encouraging to hear, over the past few days, statements to the effect that there is no military solution to the situation. At this moment in particular, this should be the motto of the whole United Nations membership and of the Security Council for a renewed commitment to diplomacy and prevention. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Brazil, and I give the floor to the representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor and also for the able way in which you have presided over the Security Council in the month of January. I thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing, and I welcome the participation of the representatives of Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, and Poland. Kenya abstained on the procedural vote to hold this meeting. We did so to reflect our contention that the main issue in question here is the impasse between NATO and the Russian Federation. We believe that it is imminently solvable and that the diplomatic steps underway already show promise. This, rather than escalation in search of a winner-take-all outcome, is what is required to support and protect international peace and security. Kenya has always maintained that the respect for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all countries is a cornerstone of global peace. Where there are disputes regarding territorial jurisdiction or security interests, we strongly support patient diplomacy as the first, second, and third options. When the dispute is between major powers and regards the security of a third country, it is imperative that they embrace a spirit of compromise. We believe that the United States, NATO, and the Russian Federation have an opportunity to establish a diplomatic framework that will allow them to resolve their differences. Their security and that of the entire world depends on them willingly taking this step, not in ushering in a new age of containment, provocation, and proxy actions. Compromise is not surrender. The special powers given to the Security Council's permanent members demands that they embrace this principle if the United Nations is not to go the way of the doomed League of Nations. Africa recalls the rejections of compromise and the search for total victory that led to the Cold War. We experienced that Cold War as a series of hot wars and interventions that deeply damaged our dreams for peace, development, and competent, inclusive government. Our internal divisions and fragilities were weaponized at the altar of geopolitical rivalry. It confirmed the truth of the African saying that recognizes, when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Madam President, given that the majority of the conflict situations the Security Council deals with are in Africa, we do not want them to serve as surrogates for a new Cold War. We in Africa, therefore, have a direct stake in de-escalation and renewed faith in diplomacy. We have serious challenges to solve together. Rarely has the world more urgently needed a United Nations that can deliver ambitiously. Madam President, Kenya believes that there is still plenty of opportunity for the Normandy format talks, the Trilateral Contact Group on Ukraine, and the direct negotiations between the United States and the Russian Federation to produce a satisfactory outcome. We urge all these parties to ensure that their negotiations respect the security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Faith in innovative diplomacy may also allow for agreements between today's major powers, inspired by the 1975 Helsinki Accords, which did deliver some stability to Europe during the Cold War. This time, however, such agreements need to advance the principle of non-interference to other parts of the world, and particularly to Africa. Madam President, in closing, it is critical that diplomacy and its acceptance of compromise as an inevitable outcome win the day. If there are future discussions to be held in the Security Council on this matter, let it be to announce a new era of cooperation. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kenya, and I give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you
señora
very much,
presidenta.
Madam President.
Y gracias a la secretaria general adjunta Di Carlo por su presentación. Doy la bienvenida a los representantes de Ucrania, Belarus, Polonia y Lituania a esta sesión. Señora Presidenta, empiezo por señalar que mi país considera oportuna la celebración de esta reunión en apego a nuestros principios de política exterior y además pertinente, toda vez que el Consejo de Seguridad debe ser informado sobre la situación que prevalece en Ucrania. No está en nuestro interés contribuir a polarizar aún más la narrativa. Así que me limitaré a señalar lo que para México constituyen principios básicos para abordar el asunto en cumplimiento con la Carta de las Naciones Unidas. Para el caso me referiré a tres de ellos. La proscripción de la amenaza o el uso de la fuerza en las relaciones internacionales, el principio de no intervención y la solución pacífica de las controversias. Respecto del primero, la sola escalada de tensiones en Europa Oriental representa una amenaza potencial para la paz y la seguridad internacionales y, por tanto, es competencia de este Consejo de conformidad con el artículo 39 de la Carta. Por eso mismo, y en virtud de la desconfianza que prevalece, es importante tratar de evitar cualquier tipo de acción que pueda considerarse hostil por cualquiera de las partes y por pequeña que parezca. Pero resulta alentador, sin duda, lo que acabamos de escuchar por parte del representante de la Federación de Rusia. Ha sido muy claro al reiterar aquí que no hay
that there is no planned invasion in Ukraine. I think that I have cited word for word what he said. Well, how good it would be if that is the case. This is a unilateral statement of non-aggression. Mexico maintains, together with what has been said by the Secretary General and others here in this room, that there is no military solution in this issue. On the contrary, preventive diplomacy and dialogue should be followed as means to achieving an easing of tensions, and there are, to that end, various channels. The conversations in Geneva, the Trilateral Contact Group, and the Normandy format. On non-intervention, we reiterate the importance of respecting the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine in full adherence to international law, the United Nations Charter, and Resolution 2625 of the General Assembly.
Corresponde asimismo a este Consejo de Seguridad determinar en su caso la existencia de un acto de agresión conforme a la Resolución 3314 de la Asamblea General. A lo anteriormente dicho, se refuerza con el principio de la solución pacífica de las controversias. Los Estados tienen el deber de resolver sus controversias por medios pacíficos, como lo establece el derecho internacional. México ha defendido, defiende y continuará defendiendo la diplomacia por encima de la fuerza. Y las vías diplomáticas para el caso que nos ocupa siguen abiertas, no se han agotado. Señora Presidenta, lo que no debe ponerse en duda es la responsabilidad de este Consejo para cumplir con sus tareas preventivas, para estar a la altura que las circunstancias le exigen. Y creo firmemente que al celebrar esta sesión lo estamos haciendo. Estamos cumpliendo con nuestro mandato sin excesos ni omisiones. Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Mexico, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to thank Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, for her informative briefing. Madam President, the UAE is closely monitoring recent developments. In the context of our discussion today, I would like to focus on the following aspects. First, the UAE firmly believes that the dispute in Europe requires various countries in the region to engage in a serious dialogue based on the values of stability, coexistence, and peace. We stress the importance of reaching a negotiated solution to this issue through the available mechanisms and with the support of regional organizations. We refer here to the Normandy format talks and the initiative of the chair of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe that aims to initiate a substantive dialogue on European security to address the security concerns of its members. We also welcome President Volodymyr Zelensky's appeal for calm, and we hope to build on it to further build confidence in the region. Second, the UAE welcomes the announcement made in the Normandy format meeting on the 26th of January, in which the Russian Federation and the Republic of Ukraine confirmed their intention to implement an unconditional ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. We are counting on the various initiatives currently underway to allow for dialogue, including between the United States and the Russian Federation, whose existing diplomatic efforts must be supported and given space to achieve the desired results. The UAE also stresses the importance of maintaining security and stability, as well as the central importance of the Minsk agreements and the need to adhere to them and ensure their implementation. This will contribute to reaching a comprehensive regional understanding that maintains the security and stability of the concerned countries and addresses all their legitimate concerns. Third, escalation must be avoided as it could have a negative impact on civilians and exacerbate the fragile humanitarian situation in eastern Ukraine. In this spirit, we stress the importance of considering the humanitarian needs of civilians and of preventing the deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the region. Fourth, respect for and adherence to international law is essential to ensure that the situation in Eastern Europe does not deteriorate further. We also stress the importance of these principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and good neighborliness, which are indispensable for the maintenance of international peace and security. Finally, Madam President, the UAE reiterates the importance of constructive dialogue to resolve differences. The role of the Security Council as the body responsible for maintaining international peace and security is essential to provide a diplomatic platform that enables states to present and resolve their differences peacefully. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of Norway. Let me start by expressing Norway's strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. This includes the Crimean Peninsula and its territorial waters. Norway is deeply concerned about the Russian large-scale military buildup near the Ukraine's border and in occupied Crimea. This is unprovoked and unjustified. Further escalation can have devastating humanitarian consequences. Through its harsh statement and unrealistic demands, Russia now challenges the security architecture in all of Europe. The crisis therefore not only affects the region, but represents a clear threat to international peace and security. Russia has repeatedly accused NATO of increasing tensions. I would like to underline that the alliance is defensive and voluntary. We do not seek confrontation. At the same time, we cannot and will not compromise on the principles on which the security in Europe rests. We stand ready to discuss security concerns. Norway supports the European Security Order based on international law and national sovereignty. We cannot allow this to be replaced by spheres of influence. Every country has the right to freely choose its security alignment. We call on Russia to de-escalate and to engage constructively in dialogue through the established international mechanisms in good faith. Furthermore, Norway underlines its support for the existing international frameworks for the sustainable and peaceful resolution of conflicts in accordance with international law. Russia has itself repeatedly invoked in many other Council discussions the principles of respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Norway calls on Russia to now respect these principles when it comes to Ukraine. Thank you. I shall now give the floor to the representative of the United States, who has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Good. Thank you, Madam President. I can't say that I am surprised by my Russian colleagues' comments, but I am disappointed. Madam President, I cannot let the false equivalency go unchecked, so I feel I must respond. Let me be clear, there are no plans to weaken Russia, as claimed by our Russian colleague today. On the contrary, we welcome Russia as a responsible member of the international community, but its actions on the border of Ukraine are not responsible. The threats of aggression on the border of Ukraine, yes, on its border, is provocative. Our recognition of the facts on the ground is not provocative. The threats of action, if Russia's security demands aren't met, is provocative. Our encouraging diplomacy is not provocative. The provocations from Russia, not from us or other members of this Council. We have made clear our commitment to the path of diplomacy. I hope our Russian colleagues will also choose this path. and engage peacefully with the international community, including Ukraine. I say to Russia simply this: your actions will speak for themselves, and we hope and encourage that you make the right choices before this council today. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the United States. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation, who has asked for the floor to make further
Благодарю вас, господин председатель. Я не планирую превращать наше заседание в диалог между Россией и Соединенными Штатами. Мы все, что хотели, сказали в нашем сегодняшнем выступлении. Однако мы по-прежнему искренне понимаем, о каких угрозах, провокациях, эскалациях со стороны России идет речь и что нам меняется. Но да ладно, я высказался по этому поводу выступления. Я хотел бы обратить внимание, что когда я слушал выступление представителей Соединенных Штатов, как мне показалось, я не услышал ни одного упоминания, ни одной ссылки на Минские соглашения, на резолюцию Совета Безопасности 2202. И это, кстати говоря, очень показательно. Вот в таком контексте мы должны говорить об урегулировании украинского кризиса. А Соединенные Штаты уводят эту тему совершенно в другую область. И, наконец, госпожа председатель, я хочу извиниться перед членами Совета и не воспринимать мой уход как демарш. Те страны, которые будут выступать после того, как предоставить им слово, я иду навстречу с генеральным секретарем в преддверии нашего председательства в Совете, который начинается завтра. И, к сожалению, не могу перенести ее в связи с графиком генерального секретаря.
So I can't change this situation because of the SG's timetable, so I'm going to have to leave. I do apologize. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation. I wish now then to again remind all speakers to limit their statement to no more than 5 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out this work expeditiously. I now give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I would like immediately to apologize that I may not be within the 5-minute limits, especially given the length of the Russian intervention. I would like to express my gratitude to the Norwegian presidency for calling this briefing of the Security Council, of the need of which I spoke exactly a fortnight ago with Her Excellency Foreign Minister of Norway during our meeting here in New York. I express our thanks to the US, who as a member of the Security Council, in close coordination with Ukraine and partners, requested today's briefing. And of course, I express our appreciation of the presentation by Undersecretary Di Carlo. It's a duty and need for the Security Council to be fully informed in case of grave threats to international peace and security. What is going on along the border with Ukraine, where the Russian Federation continues its military buildup, falls under the above qualification. It is important that Ukraine's vote is heard today in the Security Council and is not lost in translation when the position of my country has been delivered by a foreign ambassador in the Russian language. I would ask the deputy of Vasily Alexeyevich to tell him that my leadership speaks its language, has its own ambassadors and spokespersons. So there is no need to interpret the words of Ukrainian officials in a foreign language, especially if it is done the way Humpty Dumpty, Shaltai-Baltai, spoke of the meaning of the words. Even if Lewis Carroll appears to be a favorite writer of the Russian top diplomats. Against the backdrop of unprecedented sequence of high-level diplomatic contacts in the past few weeks, a serious talk in the Security Council is required more than ever to present facts, to listen to each other's positions and concerns, as well as to outline further actions towards the escalation. The fact is that nowadays about 112,000 Russian troops have been amassed around Ukraine's borders and in Crimea. And together with the maritime and aviation components, their number reaches about 130,000. Another fact is that the Russian troops are also being deployed to Belarus for the Union Resolve 2022 joint drills to be held on 10 to 20th February. They include, in particular, Iskander missile divisions, S-400 Triumph and Panzer anti-aircraft systems, Sukhoi 35 Generation 4++ fighters. On top of that, on 26 January, the Russian fleet started another military drill in the Black Sea with involvement of frigates, patrol ships, missile ships, assault landing ships, and minesweepers. This reminds us of the ongoing heavy militarization of the temporarily occupied Crimea, the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov by Russia, which poses a serious threat to Ukraine, all littoral states, and their wider region. Significant reinforcement of combat capabilities of the Russian occupation forces in Donbass is another worrying trend. Currently, these formations consist of up to 35,000 personnel, including around 3,000 servicemen of the Russian armed forces, on command posts and in other critical combat positions. In the border areas outside government-controlled illegal border crossings by cargo trains and truck convoys delivering arms supplies to the Russian armed formations in Donbass is a routine practice. OSCE SMM reports provide ample evidence of various illegal activities in the border areas. No surprise, the restrictions of the OSCE SMM freedom of movement are on the increase, in particular in non-government controlled areas close to the Ukraine-Russia border. On the 22nd December 2021, the Trilateral Contact Group reached another understanding on resuming the ceasefire regime. Nevertheless, shootings, shellings, sniper fire on Ukrainian positions, and systematic use of attack UAVs against Ukrainian troops have not stopped. We have lost 12 servicemen killed in action and 14 wounded since 22nd December 2021. Just a few days ago, on January 25, armed formations of the Russian Federation once again attacked the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of Pishevik, Donetsk region, using an attack UAV. VOG-17 fragmentation grenades dropped from the UAV resulted in severe injuries to 2 Ukrainian servicemen. The current impasse in the consultations process within the framework of the TCG continues on practically all tracks. While the decisions adopted by the Normandy format leaders during their December 2019 summit in Paris remain unimplemented. Over the past year and a half, we have seen deliberate efforts by the Russian side to obstruct TCG activities and even to prevent finalization of the already agreed, including at the expert level, arrangements within TCG in the security and humanitarian areas. All this is accompanied by Russia's stubborn denial of being a party to the armed conflict that has been raging for 8 years now in the Donbas region of Ukraine, attempts to impose a so-called direct dialogue with these puppet occupation administrations, as well as refusal to engage in substantive discussion on political settlement of the conflict. The question is why all these Russian forces are there. We have asked this question on different fora, along with sending own clear messages. Ukraine is not going to launch military offensive neither in Donbass, nor in Crimea, nor anywhere else. Ukraine sees no alternative to peaceful resolution of the ongoing conflict and restoration of its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Yet we also see a surge in Russian disinformation campaign, including false accusations of Ukraine plotting a military attack. This is not going to happen. This is direct evidence of Russia's unwillingness to de-escalate and prepare to justify its possible further aggression. We are well aware of Russia's history of ploys and provocations, and we will do everything possible to prevent another Manila-type provocation by Russia. Once again, I have clear instructions from my government to reiterate today the absence of any aggressive intention, as well as Ukraine's strong commitment to peace. Today we have heard from the Russian side that they do not intend to launch a war against my country, although one should rather speak about to launch a new phase of the Russian aggression. It is a very important message, as we still lack credible explanations by Russia of its actions and military movements. Based on experience, we cannot believe Russian declarations, but only practical moves on withdrawal of troops from the border. Madam President, Ukraine strongly rejects any attempt to use the threat of force as an instrument of pressure to make Ukraine and our partners accept illegitimate demands. There is no room for compromise on principal issues. The most principal position for Ukraine is that we have inherent sovereign right to choose our own security arrangements, including treaties of alliance which cannot be questioned by Russia. Moreover, this right is enshrined in many international legal instruments that Russia itself a party to. Ukraine will not bow to threats aimed at weakening Ukraine, undermining its economic and financial stability, and inciting public frustration. This will not happen, and the Kremlin must remember that Ukraine is ready to defend itself. At the same time, we support the need to keep diplomatic channels with Russia open, if that prevents a shift to military tools. My president has reiterated most recently that he is ready to meet his Russian counterpart. If Russia has any questions to Ukraine, it is better to meet and talk, not to bring troops to the Ukrainian borders and intimidate Ukrainian people. For Ukraine, the first priority today is to achieve a sustainable and unconditional ceasefire in Donbass. The ceasefire regime must be guaranteed, reliable, and on this basis, further steps can be taken. Intensification of the work of the Normandy format, including at the level of leaders of the four countries, is an important prerequisite for next steps towards lasting peace in Donbass. And we are ready to resume Normandy 4 talks in all formats. The recent political advisors meeting on 26 January in Paris, despite many differences, gives a hope for a continuation of the negotiation process, which Ukraine will staunchly support. Madam President, we consider that despite the Russian attempt to impede the briefing from being held, the Security Council and the wider UN membership have received today a very important information that the members of the Security Council need to take an informed decision when appropriate to act swiftly and decisively in employing preventive diplomacy under the Chapter 6 of the UN Charter that rests on the Security Council responsibility to investigate any dispute or any situation which might lead to international friction or give rise to a dispute. After listening to the Russian ambassador today, I would like to ask how long Russia will pursue a clear attempt to push Ukraine and its partners into a Kafka trap. And still, I perhaps should acknowledge that it was important to hear the Russian envoy today, and yet I must end with what my foreign minister has recently said, and I quote, "If Russian officials are serious when they say they don't want a new war, Russia must continue diplomatic engagement and pull back military forces it amassed along Ukraine's borders and in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Diplomacy is the only responsible way," end of quote. Let's judge by actions, not by riddles and semantic puzzles. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of Ukraine, and I give the floor to the representative of Belarus.
Благодарю вас, госпожа
Thank you,
председатель.
Madam President.
Республика Беларусь
The Republic of
продолжает
Belarus
занимать
is continuing
последовательную
to
и
uphold its
принципиальную
consistent
позицию
and
о
principled
неприемлемости
position
решения
on the
любого
unacceptable nature
конфликта
of resolving
силовым
any
путем.
conflict by force.
Приложив
We have
немало
made
усилий
significant
для
efforts to
урегулирования
settle the
конфликта на
conflict
Украине,
in
наша
Ukraine.
страна
Our
по-прежнему
country
готова
is still
сделать все
prepared
возможное
to do
для
everything possible
восстановления
to restore
диалога
dialogue
и
and mutual
взаимопонимания в
understanding in the
регионе.
region.
Альтернативой
There is
Минским
no alternative
договоренностям,
to the Minsk
сыгравшим
agreements
ключевую
playing
роль в
a
мирном
key role
разрешении
in the
кризиса,
peaceful settlement
нет.
of the crisis.
Переговорный
The
процесс в
negotiation
рамках
process
трехсторонней
as part of
контактной
the
группы,
trilateral
а
contact
также
group,
практическая
and also the
реализация
practical
договоренностей
implementation of
в
the
зоне
agreements in the
внутриукраинского
conflict
конфликта
zone of the
позволят вывести
domestic
мирный
Ukrainian
процесс по
conflict will
Украине на
enable the peace
устойчивую
process in
положительную
Ukraine to get on a
траекторию.
sustainable, positive track.
Внесение сегодняшней
The
темы
US
делегации
delegation
США на
proposing
рассмотрение
today's
Совета
topic for
Безопасности ООН
consideration in the
представляет
Security
собой
Council is
очередную
yet
попытку
another
искусственного
attempt to
нагнетания
artificially whip
напряженности в
up
регионе
tension in the region
исключительно в качестве
purely
инструмента политических
as an instrument of
обвинений.
political
Подобные
accusations.
действия лишь
Such
усиливают
actions
недоверие
only
и
heighten
никоим
mistrust
образом не
and in no
способствуют
way
снятию
help
разногласий.
to solve disagreements.
Несмотря на
Despite the
озабоченность,
concerns
высказываемую
expressed
неоднократно представителями
frequently by
Республики Беларусь
representatives
на
of the Republic of
международных
Belarus
переговорных площадках
at
и в ходе
international
двусторонних
fora,
контактах,
negotiating forum
наращивание
during bilateral
военных
contacts,
сил
the
у наших
expansion of
западных и
military
южных границ не
powers
только не
on our western
прекращается,
and
но и
southern borders not
приобретает
only is not ceasing,
угрожающий характер.
but rather it's becoming threatening
Несмотря
in
на
nature,
неоднократные призывы к
despite
диалогу
our
и
consistent calls for
сотрудничеству, в том
dialogue and
числе и в сфере
cooperation,
контроля над
including
вооружениями,
regarding arms
давление на нашу
control.
страну со
In
стороны
fact, even
отдельных
more
государств
pressure is
лишь
being exerted on our
усиливается.
country by individual
Предложения о
countries.
возвращении
Our
к переговорам
proposals
не
to
находят
return
отклика
to
у наших
negotiations are not being
западных
responded
партнеров.
to by our Western
Я, кстати,
partners.
хотел бы обратить
Incidentally,
внимание,
I'd
что
like to draw your
сегодня здесь, в
attention
этом
to the
зале,
fact that
звучали
here
ссылки на
we heard a
Будапештский
reference to the
меморандум.
Budapest
Я
Memorandum.
очень прошу вас
I
перечитать этот
do
документ
really urge you to read that
относительно
document
Республики Беларусь
regarding the
и
Republic of Belarus,
обратить
and
внимание
I would
на
draw your
обещания,
attention to the
содержащиеся в этом
promises
документе,
in that
не
document
оказывать на
not
Беларусь
to
меры экономического принуждения
exert
и при
any
этом
coercive economic measures
те
on Belarus,
пакеты,
and to
многочисленные пакеты
remember the numerous
экономических санкций,
packages
которые
of
со
economic
стороны отдельных
sanctions
государств
from individual
против нас
states
уже
that
были
have been
введены.
imposed against us.
С учетом
Given
сложившейся
the
непростой
current
обстановки,
difficult
главы
situation,
Беларуси
the
и
leaders of Belarus
России
and
приняли
Russia have
решение
taken
о
the decision
совместном
to
проведении
conduct jointly
мероприятий по оценке
activities to
готовности
assess the
вооруженных сил
preparedness
двух
of the armed
государств
forces of the two
обеспечить
states
военную
to
безопасность с
provide
учетом
military
обязательств
security, given the
военно-политического союза.
commitments of our
В
military
рамках
political
указанных
alliance.
договоренностей
As
принято
part of
решение
these
о проведении
agreements, a
в
decision
феврале
has been taken
текущего
in
года
February this year to
проверки сил
conduct
реагирования
a verification
союзного
of
государства.
the
Главными целями проверки
responsiveness
вооруженных
of
сил
our
являются
forces of our
оценка
alliance,
готовности и
the main aims
способности органов
of
военного
this verification
управления к
of the
совместным
military
действиям
forces is
по
to assess the
обеспечению
preparedness and
безопасности
capability of our
союзного
military
государства.
command and control, to
Отработка
conduct joint
совместных действий
exercises
по
to guarantee
нейтрализации
security of
угроз
our
на
allied
границах
states,
союзного государства,
to
вызванных
develop
в том
joint
числе
measures to
миграционным
eradicate the
кризисом
threat
и
on the borders of
необходимостью
our allied
стабилизации
state,
гуманитарной
including
обстановки.
caused by the migration crisis
Организация
and the need
обороны
to
и
stabilize the
охраны
humanitarian
стратегически
situation,
важных объектов,
organizing the defense and protection
пресечение
of
и
strategically
отражение
important
внешней агрессии
facilities,
в ходе
to curb
оборонительных
and ward off
операций,
external acts of aggression
противодействие
during
терроризму и
defensive
защита
operations,
интересов
and to combat
союзного
terrorism
государства.
and protect the interests
На
of
завершающем
our
этапе
state
мероприятий в
alliance.
период
At the
с 10
final
по
stage of
20
these
февраля
activities,
текущего года
from from the 10th to the 20th of February this year, there will be a joint Belarusian-Russian exercises called Allied Resolve 2020 2022. During these drills, there will be joint drills carried out for specific purposes. We note that these options for actions for this regional group of troops are something that have been regularly developed during joint exercises. They are always purely defensive in nature, and they pose no threat either for our European partners or our neighboring countries.
Республика Беларусь
The Republic of
продолжает
Belarus
неукоснительно
is
соблюдать все взятые на себя обязательства в рамках международных и региональных договоров по контролю над вооружениями. Кстати говоря, вся информация о предстоящих военных учениях содержится в полном объеме на официальном сайте Министерства обороны Республики Беларусь. Несколько дней назад, 28 января, президент Республики Беларусь Александр Лукашенко, отвечая на вопросы, заявил, что война возможно лишь в двух случаях: при нападении на Беларусь, либо при нападении на нашего союзника Российскую Федерацию. Реагируя на различные инсинуации в адрес Беларуси в приложении к внутриукраинской ситуации, хотим еще раз напомнить, что мы готовы и далее оказывать все необходимое содействие в урегулировании конфликта на Украине, в том числе путем создания всех необходимых условий для
conditions for the work of the trilateral group and for negotiations in any possible formats and
Сегодня многие в мире говорят о необходимости проведения широкого диалога по вопросам международной безопасности. С инициативой проведения подобного диалога под условным названием
under the conditional name
Helsinki II.
Such an initiative was put forward by the President of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, some years ago now, and this idea, unfortunately, has not yet been implemented. The Republic of Belarus sincerely wants a swift settlement of the regional crisis, purely on the basis of dialogue and mutual respect. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Belarus, and I give the floor to the representative of Poland.
Madam President, Madam Undersecretary General, Excellencies, Poland is grateful for convening today's meeting on the Security Council, as we are increasingly concerned with Russia's continuous large-scale military build-up on the border with Ukraine, both in the territory of Russia but also in the territory of Belarus, including continuous redeployments of troops, prepositioning of military hardware and offensive weapons. We cannot keep quiet, because what is happening in our neighborhood constitutes a serious threat to international peace and security, reaching far beyond our region and continent. The current security situation in Eastern Europe unfortunately follows a pattern of precedents, with the Russian Federation being the destabilizing actor in the region, at least since 2008 and the war in Georgia, to 2014, and illegal annexation of the Crimean Peninsula. As we speak, the frozen conflicts in eastern Ukraine, in the Georgian breakaway regions of Skhin Valley and Abkhazia, and in the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova are unresolved, undermining the stability and regional security of this part of the world. Madam President, we cannot keep quiet, because what is happening in our neighborhood constitutes the outright violation of the fundamental principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Poland deeply adheres to the principles of international law, such as sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, the inviolability of frontiers, and non-use or threat of force. And we call upon all member states to act in the same spirit. We know very well from our country's history that a political order based on the spheres of influence brings no positive results. It is here in the United Nations where it is our duty to protect the principles of international law, strongly condemn any threat of use of force, and work together to dismantle spheres of influence in order to maintain peace. What is at stake today is not only the subordination of Ukraine and the creation of the so-called buffer zone in Eastern and Central Europe. The real threat is to shake the very foundation of the security architecture in Europe by undermining such tenets of international law as inviolability of borders and the freedom to choose one's own security arrangements, among others. Unfortunately, this may have a global impact, and contribute to deterioration of international security, not to mention the possible humanitarian crisis. And there are other revisionist powers which may follow the suit. Madam President, Poland deeply believes in the power of preventive diplomacy. Holding the chairmanship in office of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, we stand open to facilitate talks on the European security within the organization. OSCE can provide the right venue to discuss matters of concern because of being the broadest of the regional formats. We call for constructive engagement of all participating states in order to find a peaceful solution to the current crisis. Let there be no doubt that the current status quo is not a solution at all. Living in a constant fear of another frozen conflict is against the commitment of these United Nations to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors. With Winter Olympics just less than a week away, let us do whatever we can to maintain the Olympic peace in Eastern Europe. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Poland, and I give the floor to the representative of Lithuania.
Madam President, let me thank you for convening this meeting on such important issue and for granting an opportunity to speak. I am delivering this statement on behalf of the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and my own country, Lithuania. Firstly, let me reiterate our country's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. We strongly condemn the clear violation of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity by acts of aggression by the Russian armed forces since February 2014. We do not recognize and continue to condemn the illegal annexation of Ukraine's Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol by Russia. We remain concerned over the increasing militarization of the peninsula, the severe deterioration of the human rights situation there. Let me add, in this context, that we welcome the establishment of the International Crimean Platform launched at the kickoff summit that took place on 23rd August in Kiev, and support the implementation of its joint declaration. We invite other UN members to join this initiative as well. Madam President, the conflict in Ukraine has claimed around 14,000 lives, displaced 1.5 million persons, and has resulted in countless suffering on both sides of the contact line in eastern Ukraine. We reiterate our full support to the efforts towards peaceful and sustainable resolution of this conflict, namely in the Normandy format, the Trilateral Contact Group, and the OSCE, including its special monitoring mission to Ukraine. Yet, despite all international efforts, until now, we see little progress towards the resolution of this conflict. Ukraine's constructive approach has not been reciprocated by Russia. We condemn Russia's continued aggressive actions and threats against Ukraine and call on Russia to de-escalate the situation and to abide by international law. We call on Russia to immediately stop fueling the conflict by providing financial and military support to the armed formations it backs, and to withdraw the Russian military troops and materiel from the eastern border of Ukraine and Crimean Peninsula. Madam President, despite all diplomatic efforts, Russia further escalates and continues military deployment around Ukraine's borders. Moreover, Russian troops are deployed in Belarus as well. This adds up to the current escalation and is of direct concern to us. Kremlin continues to use a false narrative that Russia is forced to defend itself from a threat, even as the opposite is true. It is Russia who is threatening Ukraine and other neighbors by positioning over 100,000 troops. Russia is not a victim as it attempts to portray itself. It is the aggressor, strengthening its security at the expense of others. By its own actions in the Georgian breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, the Transnistrian region, the illegal annexation of Crimea, Russia has contributed to a significant deterioration of security environment in Europe. We reaffirm full commitment to the core principles of international security enshrined in the UN Charter, founding documents of the OSCE, including the Helsinki Final Act and the Charter of Paris, and others. This includes, notably, the sovereign equality and territorial integrity of states, the inviolability of frontiers, refraining from the use of force. Their violation by Russia is an obstacle to a common and indivisible security space in Europe and threatens peace and stability on our continent. Times of limited sovereignty in Europe are long gone. Notions of spheres of influence have no place in the 21st century. States have freedom to choose or change their own security arrangements. No third country has a veto right over the sovereign choices of independent and democratic states. Madam President, in response to the recent tensions, the EU has made clear in the December and January European Council conclusions that any further military aggression against Ukraine will have massive consequences and severe costs, including restrictive measures to be coordinated closely with our transatlantic partners. Madam President, we call on Russia to respect principles of UN Charter, de-escalate, and engage in genuine dialogue. It is our duty as members of the UN to defend the rules-based international system. Violation of its fundamental principles will have the consequences for other parts of the world. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Lithuania. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
No, I think